Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the City of Virginia Council Chambers. This is a regular scheduled committee of the whole meeting working session. We'll call this meeting to order. Today's date is Tuesday, November 15th, 2022. The time is 9:04 a.m. We have a full agenda today, obviously, as you can see. And we'll turn this meeting over to our City Administrator, Britt C. Brendis. Britt?
Good morning. The first item on the agenda is Kraus Anderson update on the Iron Trail Motors Event Center and final project completion.
Okay, thank you. Please come forward and state your name officially for the record, and welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting. We're excited about this next step.
Pat Wirtz with Kraus Anderson. Been a while since I've been back. It's nice to see y'all. One of the final pieces of the puzzle to get the final certificate of occupancy from the city was the signage relocated from the handicap on the west side to the east side, and then adding the stop sign in. And Bill Cole got that, and he was going to look at it yesterday. And that was kind of the last piece of the puzzle for the CO. So after that, we should have that fully intact. Then a couple of the items to go through are more cosmetic, the 11-month walkthrough stuff. Most of those items have been complete now. A couple items, there was some concrete that needs to be replaced on the east side door that heaved up. TNT was not able to get it done this fall, so they're going to do that next spring. That's more part of the 11-month walkthrough item that's not holding up the CO. And then everything else, there is a couple of things that I was trying to get from DSGW and CMTA, the mechanical engineer, of some improvements for over there for some pricing requests. But that's not back, so probably in the next couple of weeks, we'll have that enhanced review. One of the main ones was increasing the RPZs and the lineage, so that when the Iron Trail Motor staff floods the rinks, they're able to flood them quicker. So it's more of an efficiency thing on their end. And then the other one would be for the fireplace, isn't exactly was running correct. And they found that due to the pressures of the building, that an induction fan is needed. So that would be one price request. And then the other would be the IT room up by Brian Silver's office. It's getting hot and needs a mini split air conditioning unit to keep the temperatures regulated. But those three items are not holding up a certificate of occupancy. It was meaning the signage was the last piece of the puzzle. So sorry for the delay on that. We thought it had been done when Sabi Bituminous did the final lift on that east parking lot. And so did they, and until we found out it had not been done. So sorry about that. That's kind of...
Okay, thank you. We'll go around the room for the elected body, and I also like to hear from Brian Silver, our Park Rec Director. Mr. Wirtz, if you could just hang on for a moment. We'll go around the room first from right to left. Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Last year at the opening concert, I brought forward to Eric and to Brian and a few other people, there's no white lighting for the handicap on the west end of the building. And I was told a couple times that was going to be addressed, and there's still no lighting on the west side for the accessible parking. There was a flaw in the design somewhere, and we do have a few LED lights where the miners used to be, but I'm going to keep checking on that because it is very dark on that side of the building in the evening.
On the west side? On
the west side.
Okay.
There are no light standards up by the sidewalk. The furthest one is on the northwest corner, way up at the top. Okay. I know I brought that to Eric at least 3 different times. I may have even emailed it here or there, but I want to make sure that gets addressed because I believe it's a huge safety problem, especially when it's dark at 4 o'clock for 2 or 3 months. So, sure. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Johnson. Any other councilor? Brian, Park and Rec Director. Along with Pat up here, maybe so the certificate of occupancy, aside from those items that had been just expressed by Mr. Wirtz and then the request by Councilor Johnson regarding the lighting, is there anything else that you would consider before we move forward with a certificate of occupancy?
As far as the certificate of occupancy goes, no, there are not more things to move forward other than what Mr. Wirtz had addressed. There are some things that we would like to change in the functionality of the building with which Mr. Wertz also did address, that we're working through pricing to bring to the council to use some more of that contingency budget for.
Okay. One question that I have, and I know this is probably because of the weather and the conditions that we have up here in northern Minnesota, but there's big cracks in the concrete, particularly in the main lobby area there. I mean, I guess I was informed that this is something that does happen on occasion, and there's no way to repair it. Is that an accurate assessment, or?
Well, the first floor of that one, we were actually gonna get that filled. That was part of them about the walkthrough to go through. I do not believe T&D has done that one yet, but at the bottom one that's on the grade, we were gonna get those filled. But basically, it's just gonna be caulking, otherwise you have to replace those entire panels, which is possible, then you have to polish it to go through, then it'll be an obvious patch. So in the past, when these issues do occur, you just put a filler, like a caulk joint in there, and then it's just over time, it just becomes a maintenance issue. That is the one downfall of doing that when you fill those cracks, is it just long-term maintenance thing. So the second floor, some of those cracks that are composite decking, that is kind of a, not to get in the whole concrete thing of that to go through, is always the argument, should you saw cut control joints on concrete topping? The decision by the design team was to put saw cuts in there. They did put those saw cuts in there, but that controls the cracks. There really isn't a whole lot to do except for you can fill those. I know the one by the edge of the steps, we are gonna get that one filled, but the other ones are, that's kind of, hate to say it, that's kind of what concrete does. I know it's not the best answer, but the ones that are gonna be larger and cause any, the cracks get larger and cause any hazards, then if those do cause hazards, then they can be replaced at that time. But the smaller ones are kind of more cosmetic.
So once we establish the certificate of occupancy, those issues as they come down the pike, is there a warranty issue for a year or longer? Or how does that work if in fact that these concrete cracks that are filled, they don't hold or something happens? Is that a replacement cost that's incurred by the city, or is this part of a warranty type of situation?
They would fail to go through, the warranty technically would not cover those cracks to go through. Like I said, the ones that are very bad, if they are ones, those would be warranty, but these cracks would not fall under warranty. So, and then the upkeep to go through to maintain that technically isn't a warranty item either, but.
Okay, thank you. Do we need to take action with respect to the certificate of occupancy at this meeting? Just an update. Very good, okay. Does anybody have any other questions or comments for Mr. Wertz or Brian, our Park and Rec Director, with respect to the update on the certificate of occupancy and the moving forward? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Wertz. Thanks, Mr. Silber. Okay.
Item number 2 is review the following ordinances, and the first one is City Code, Chapter 10, creating Section 10.18 entitled Camping on Public Property Prohibited.
I have one question about this particular part of camping on public property, and I'm sure this probably doesn't apply, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. So say in the future, we decide that at some point in time, somewhere along park property, we may find a way to establish some setups for these campers that come in on, hookups and for them to stay for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and like they do in some of these other campgrounds around the area. And so if we were to do that, would this camping ordinance have to be adjusted to accommodate any hookups for those campers that want to stay for a week or month or whatever? That would be my question under the ordinance. Or if it's just designated to like tents and the homeless and these others. Brian?
Thank you, Mayor. In reviewing the language of the ordinance, if we did want to establish some campsites, we would have to adjust the ordinance. And what we could do is just indicate, we could put a simple provision in here that, for example, under C, it shall be unlawful for any person to camp on any public property including but not limited to, we could insert in there some language that says except where designated by the city, or something like that, where we can designate spaces that would be available.
Yeah, I think that would be appropriate to have that, where we have that option in the event that, situations arise. So, Brian, any comments from you with respect to the ordinance, the first one, City Code Chapter 10 regarding camping on public property prohibited?
No, in the last meeting, the question was camping along the trails. In reviewing what other cities have done, they have used the same distance for their trails as what they do in their parks when doing a ordinance such as this. So we went with the 100 feet. We also did change the language from residential to private property.
So one more quick, and I wasn't at the last meeting, I was at a training session, so this question may have already been asked. So the picnic venues that are across from 6th Avenue, Circle K, or the Holiday gas station, where we've had some transients living there
Yes.
on a regular basis. Now, who owns that picnic structure?
City of Virginia, that's a park property.
That's part
So
of a
this would,
Yeah.
that would be falling under this ordinance.
Very good, yeah, for the 100-feet issue.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the update, thank you. Any other questions, comments, concerns from the council regarding this ordinance? Now, are we going to possibly move this forward to the council meeting for adoption and then for its first reading? Is that the intent? Good. So, okay, let's have some more discussion. Councilor Beyondich.
Thank you. So if a citizen called in, who responds to that call and who enforces this ordinance?
If a citizen calls in to notify us that somebody is camping, this is the teeth that the police need to be able to respond to that.
Okay, and so our police officers would enforce this ordinance?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Beyondich. Councilor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. So I think, if I can remember correctly, I think we spoke about if we do have situations where people would like to come in and do some camping, or if there's a bike event going on the trail system and they want to come in and camp, that the city could issue a permit. Isn't that, I don't know, Brian, I think you were here for that meeting. And so I don't know if the language needs to be changed in the ordinance to reflect what you're saying, or if we want to go the permit route, that the city would have an option to give permits to any, say, event that's going on, or any people that want to come forward and actually do a camp situation. I know that was part of I'm pretty sure that's what we discussed, or how we were framing it, but I don't know which would be the best solution.
Brian?
Thank you, Mayor. Council, in response to the question, I think we could, I don't think we have to make it an either or. I think we could craft language or put language into this ordinance that indicates that the city either can designate areas where camping can occur, or can especially permit areas where camping can occur. The critical feature would be that the city would be able to control and designate those areas, so we're not getting too much of a mix into residential or interfering with business operations, those sorts of things, because camping in city limits becomes a little bit tricky sometimes.
Okay, so with that, I mean, I'd be comfortable moving it forward if you want to have that language change. I don't know if that's possible by Tuesday, by the council meeting. Or if you want us to bring it back and review one more time, but if that's okay, I'm comfortable moving it forward.
Well, I think maybe if we get the whole thing straight, we'll hear from the rest of the councilors as well, so we can see the final draft before us, but we take a look at it. And one of the other reasons why I bring that up as well, Council, is that, you have the Land of the Loon, and you've got people who come up here and have their arts and crafts show. Sure, they camp out in the parking lot of the school, but they also camp in the park itself and stay overnight in that regard. So that camping issue, the addendum in there, it gives us the opportunity to designate or authorize under certain circumstances that, whether it's be by permitting or by vote of the council or whatever. So I think that addendum should be put in there for us to consider moving forward.
And Mayor, if I may, If you look at section C toward the end, it does indicate that the city council may in its discretion designate certain public property within the city limits which shall be available for campsites to be used temporary living or overnight sleeping quarters.
Okay, that satisfies me. Thank you. Counselor Johnson? Okay, thank you. Okay, very good. Thank you. So,
Does that address what you were wanting to see, Counselor Paulson?
I'm was comfortable. I think my question was mainly with the trail system, and that's been addressed, so thank you.
okay, so are you requesting, Britt, we could move this forward to the next city council meeting for its first reading? Thank you. Anybody else? Counselor Johnson, you have your light on?
Yes, I will move Chapter 10, Section 1.8, camping on public property prohibited to the first reading at the next council meeting.
Okay, Counselor Johnson moves this to the council meeting for final approval of the draft ordinance. Is there support?
I support for further discussion. please.
Support by Counselor Freely for further discussion. Further discussion, Counselor Freely.
Sorry, I didn't bring this up earlier, but there was concerns raised last year when there was a person living on Main Street in an abandoned private property, and I'm just wondering what kind of authority the city has to intervene in regard to that. Case in point, for example, what if the person that owns the abandoned property has no problem with that? Could that person have been fine living there for months and months without us having any authority to move them along? So this doesn't address any of that. So that's one of my concerns is like, what authority does the city have to move people along who may be occupying abandoned private property?
I know there used to be a vagrancy ordinance, no longer exists, but Brian?
Thank you, Mayor. Counselor, I think the response to this question is a little bit complicated, because if somebody has consent from a property owner, then they can be there fairly indefinitely, depending on the conditions and whether it's a habitable property or whether a condition is habitable. The difficult part, and especially for the enforcement piece, is law enforcement. It's difficult for law enforcement officers to go onto private property and to know who's authorized and who's not unless they've received a call from a private property owner. And so fortunately or unfortunately, I think one of the things that we have to do is just make sure that the public is aware that they've got a responsibility to keep an eye on or their private property to know if people have established residence, because once that happens, it can create some difficult situations.
Okay, thank you. So it has been moved and supported. Is there further discussion? Counselor Beyondich.
And thank you for bringing that up. We are dealing with another property in town that the owner is okay with people squatting. So I totally understand what you're saying, that on city property, the city has the authority to do that. But in this case, the property owner is okay with people squatting, and it's very difficult to maneuver through that. So thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Beyondich. So it has been moved and supported to move the City Code Chapter 10 by creating Section 10.1 entitled Camping on Public Property Prohibited to the council meeting for this first reading. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
And the next one is Chapter 2, creating Section 2.58 entitled Regulation as to Parklands.
Brian, anything you want to add?
We've just made the updates and changes that the council had suggested or requested at the last committee of the whole meeting. So again, our normal park hours would be between 6 a.m. and 11 p.m. daily. If a group wanted to have their event begin earlier, run later, that is allowed via their permit. Dogs are allowed in parks, but must be on a leash as per the city Code 10.11.b.1. Alcoholic beverages are permitted. Cars shall be parked on designated areas. Ground fires are prohibited unless allowed by a permit. Refuse must be placed in trash containers, and driving motor vehicle on park land other than on designated parking areas shall be prohibited. This rule obviously does not apply to public safety or park and recreation motor vehicles while in performance of their duties.
Okay, thank you. We'll go left to right, Counselor Paulson, then on to Counselor Freely, and then to Counselor Johnson. Counselor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just, Brian, as you were reading that on number 7 and everything else is redlined with police department and changed to public safety, should we change that police department to public safety as well?
We can.
And I'm comfortable moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Freely.
I would like to see under Part D, 2, dogs are allowed in parks must be on a leash and owners are required to pick up after them. I think that, unless there's somewhere else that that's addressed. Just FYI, I think having a dog's leash, that's great, but then we should clean up after him as well.
Of course, which is a citywide ordinance as it is right now, so, thank you. Counselor Johnson.
I was going to address 7 and the police there as well, but thank you for making the changes, and having them redlined really is helpful. It speeds up the review, so I will move this forward.
Counselor Johnson moves for the next city council meeting for the first reading, City Code Chapter 2 by creating Section 2.8 entitled Regulations to Park Lands. Is there support? Support by Counselor Beyondich. Is there any further discussion? Counselor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. So just to clarify, you're okay with striking through the police department and adding city public safety department, and then adding what Counselor Friedlieb wants to add regarding the cleaning up, and maybe cite that ordinance?
Exactly, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So it has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carries.
Item on the agenda is review the request from the Blue Line Club to include an addendum to their contract regarding room rentals.
Still me. So, Blue Line Club has approached us. If you remember, we've entered into a agreement with them for them to be operating the dry land room in the Iron Trail Motors Event Center. One of the things that the Blue Line Club does is they do spaghetti feeds and activities for the team prior to big games or after big games. In our agreement with Rockridge Youth Hockey Association, we worked in a discounted room rental agreement, but we don't have that in the high school agreement, and we don't have it in the Blue Line Club agreement. So the Blue Line Clubs reached out to see if we could negotiate something out for them to receive the discounted room rentals. So bringing it to the council to see if the council is willing to let us discuss that and tailor something similar for the Blue Line Club that we have with the youth organization or not.
I have one question, Brian. So this Blue Line Club, it doesn't include the high school.
The Blue Line Club is the high school parents is parents of the high school players.
Okay. So does the high school have any authority over the Blue Line Club?
Blue Line Club works in conjunction with the high school. I don't know if I would say the high school has authority over them.
Well, I guess I just won't want to beat around the bush here. We're going to be in negotiations for ice time coming up here, starting, and you've already had a meeting moving forward. There's some issues that need to be resolved before next season. So if we're acquiescing in some respects for the high school to have some special reduced rates, to operate their fundraising facility, which I, think it's, should be done. But, I know this is likely is a separate issue, the ice time thing, but as we're moving forward, it's an all-inclusive, collaborative that we should have from the high school with respect to how we are using our ice time and those kind of things. So I'm all for having the opportunity for those people to get that reduced rate so they can raise money for the funds it's for our youth. I don't have a problem with that, but just moving forward, I'm just wondering what authority the school would have in that regard, whether they do or not, I don't know. So just some food for thought, I guess. Counselor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. Brian, could we get some more specific information regarding what the other contract, I guess I don't have that in front of me, so I don't remember. I don't know what the rates were in there, but could we get some information on what the rates youth hockey is being charged for those additional rooms?
I don't have it in front of me either, so I would hate to misquote it, but they were very reasonable rates that we had given them. I want to say like a section, the ballroom was $25 per section. A meeting classroom was $10 per section, something like that. So greatly reduced from our normal rental rates.
Okay, so I'm trying to I just want to look at, I would like to see what's the normal rate, what's the nonprofit rate, because the Blue Line Club's a nonprofit, and then what youth hockey rate is. And so if I could get those numbers, or we could get those numbers, that would help me to understand revenue.
And at this point, I'm just wanting to know, is the city council going to grant us permission to entertain discussing this with the Blue Line Club?
I guess I'd like to see the numbers before I'd say yes or no. I'd like to
Okay.
just see the overall, like what maybe their plans of usage, because that's basically also staff time to set up rooms. And I would say maybe kitchen usage, or no, if they're doing spaghetti feeds, are they using the kitchen?
Possible, if they were to have the serve safe courses, then yes, otherwise they would cater things
Cater
in.
it, okay. Yeah, I think I would just feel a little bit more comfortable just having the breakdown of the normal costs and nonprofit costs, and then what the Blue Line, or what the youth hockey rates are now, and then maybe talk about it and move forward on it as we understand better the numbers, and then the actual usage of those, how often they're going to use the ballroom or those extra rooms for any activity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Johnson.
I think that's along the lines I was thinking of, is being able to compare across. And just one question, does the Blue Line Club rent ice from us?
No, the Blue Line Club does not rent the ice, the high school rents the ice.
Okay, that clarifies a lot. So, yeah, I am supportive of having the discussion, but I think I'd like to have that information as we move forward. So I'll make a motion to allow the discussion to start, as long as we're provided with that information prior to the discussion starting, so that we can all be on the same page. Does that make sense, Pam?
Yes.
Is it clear? Thank you.
A move by Counselor Johnson to approve the entering into a discussion with the Blue Line Club for rental space, provided that we get the information about the costs associated with that and prior to these meetings. Is there support? Support by Counselor Freely. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Brian.
Item number 4 on the agenda is a resolution hiring the community development planner. I'm going to defer this to Sherry Erickson, our HR person.
Sherry?
Thank you. I was just looking through my emails to see if the candidate had responded back. She had a list of questions that I addressed yesterday. So Britt, did she say anything to you? No. Nothing yet. Didn't seem negative, so I would like to go ahead with the resolution for hiring, but I'm still waiting for her to respond back to me.
I'm not comfortable myself moving forward with hiring the development planner until that candidate commits. Counselor Beyondich.
You, and that's what I was going to say. You seem a little hesitant, so I also would like to wait until we have all the information. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor?
Yes, go
Reason for
ahead.
that is that we cannot give the name out until.
Yeah, of course not. Yep, sure, certainly. Okay, so we'll hold that in abeyance then until such time as we get a commitment one way or the other, and then we can take action then. And if we do get a commitment prior to next council meeting, I'm assuming that we could take action then, if you get that commitment prior to the council meeting. Okay, thank you. We're just saying that,
Wait till the next meeting.
okay, thank you. Okay.
Item number 5 is a request from the MPCA for the loon to come back for the 2023 Minnesota State Fair. They again are willing to pay the cost to have the loon hauled down to the fair.
I will move that forward. It was a huge success this year.
Motion by Counselor Johnson to approve the loon to attend the 2023 Minnesota State Fair. Is there support? Support by Counselor Beyondich. Is there any further discussion? Would it be under the same circumstances and costs associated with that as it was this last year? Thank you. Moved and supported. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Mayor, can I ask a question?
I'm sorry, Gary. Counselor Freely.
Can I refer back to number 4 real quick?
Yes, okay.
Jerry, are we privy to what those concerns are with regard to whether or not they're going to commit to this position or not? Or is that something you're dealing with internally? Or would prefer to?
Yeah, Sherry?
She actually did have a couple questions. I gave her a bunch of information. She said once I fully review the attachments, which I gave her, she said she would get back to us as soon as possible. A lot of it has to do with the fact that MAPE is seeking to petition this into their union, which would give us a little more latitude to negotiate with her.
And will that be accomplished prior to her then being recommended? Or would that be an
That's kind of
after
in
the
the
fact?
air, and we would have to talk with city administrator and the union, see where we're at.
That would not be done in time for this.
But you guys have deemed that it would be more preferable to have that position as a MAPE position versus an AFSCME position.
We have not had that discussion. MAPE has indicated verbally that they are looking to make that position, to petition that position be put into MAPE. That is a process. It has to go through the Bureau of Mediation Services. It's going to take a little while for them to sort it out.
What I'm saying is, as an administrative team, do we agree, do we have consensus that it would be preferable to the team to have that a MAPE position versus AFSCME?
That's a discussion we'll have when we get the petition, move the position, if that comes forward from MAPE.
All right, thank you.
And her questions really were related to health insurance questions, things that most people ask when they get hired at a position, vacation, health insurance, those kind of questions is what she was asking.
Could I ask, are most positions like this in cities of our size, MAPE position versus an AFSCME position?
That I do not know. That's a good question. I don't know that answer.
Thank you.
Okay, so I would just have one more question. So a person accepts a position as a community planner, as a new employee, and that position, prior to negotiations with the MAPE unit, is now an AFSCME position. So if that person accepts this job, it's under the conditions that we have, it's an AFSCME. And then if there's a petition moving forward to move them into MAPE, what does that look like for that employee? I mean, so is it prudent? I mean, I wouldn't want to do this, but is it prudent to delay the hiring until we vet that out? It's not. Okay, very good,
It
okay.
could take, if it's contested, it could take a long time. We're
Well, that's
talking years.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Year or more, so.
So if we get that community planner on board, the same scenario could hold on, but we'll still have somebody working here.
Correct.
So my question is, what kind of angst would that cause that employee when there's,
I don't want to speculate on something that hasn't happened yet. Like I said, it was a verbal mention from MAPE. It wasn't, we haven't received a petition. I don't know that it's going to happen or not. So at this moment, you are absolutely correct, Mayor. She gets hired under AFSCME contract. That's the contract she would abide to, and what we would have to provide her the benefits with that.
Okay, very good, thank you. So we'll have the information on, hopefully by the next Tuesday, if the position has been accepted, and then we can take action at that time. Okay, thank you. Anything else, Counselor Paulson?
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a follow-up regarding, and I know the situation has not happened yet, but if the petition circumstance does happen, I would assume that that would change salary requirement or the dollar amount.
It would be up to the council to negotiate with MAPE.
And we all know where MAPE positions are in terms of the wage scale. So I'm concerned about this. And I feel like we should have had this discussion in determining if that position, we already determined it was AFSMI.
Position is an AFSCME at this moment. We have no other.
And then MAPE has the right to petition at any time? Or is it when the contract begins? Are there certain times MAPE can petition?
Mayor, if I may.
Yes, Brian?
Counselor, as a legal matter, my opinion is that MAPE could petition any time because what we're talking about is definitionally where an employee fits. And the petition by MAPE would be essentially that the position, as it's crafted, fits more squarely within their bargaining unit as that's defined with the city than AFSCME's bargaining unit is as it's defined with the city.
And I would assume that process is a lengthy process. But once this individual would be hired, they would be hired under AFSCME at the wage that's set, that we've already gone through. And
Advertised and-
it's
yep,
set.
yep.
And then the petition process could happen, which could potentially enact a switch to a different union, which then we would have to go through the salary matrix. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that, but I don't know what recommendations we would need to, I understand we need to fill the position, but I'm just a little concerned as to, are we cart before the horse or should we have had that discussion? I guess I'd like a little bit more clarification. Thank you.
Know that MAPE was going to come forward or not. And we do not know that the Bureau of Mediation Services is going to allow it. We don't know what's going to happen. So we did advertise the position with what we had, the job description and the wage and the contract. She asked for that information. We gave her the contract to review, which is common for new applicants. They ask for that kind of stuff. And we just haven't heard back from her yet if she's.
And as far as that process goes, that could consider a petition to the Bureau of Mediation Services in the state of Minnesota for consideration based on the job description, right? Okay, thank you. Sherry?
Correct. I just want to reiterate that I laid out what was available to her as a MAPE employee, and she is just going to have to make that decision. As an AFSCME employee. And she'll just have to make that decision, and then as things fall out, she'll have a say, or if she's not going to accept it, we'll move on.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion? Counselor Freely.
My concern is we have a rather ambitious project that's underway currently up on First and Second Avenue, and then others as well that are imminent in the city. And when we advertised this position, there was no hesitancy on part of the applicants with regard to the fact that this was advertised as an AFSCME position, am I correct? So we've gone through the process and we've made the recommendation. I feel we should make a resolution to hire this person, and then they either accept or don't accept, which I hope they would accept if they are the top candidate. Unless people have other concern, but my concern is we need someone in this position. We've long needed somebody in this position since John left. We've gone through the process. They didn't hesitate applying for the position and interviewing for it under the guidelines that we put forth. And we now have it on our agenda to hire this person. My recommendation is to move forward with the hiring of this person. And if they choose not to take it, then that's up to them. But for us to backpedal now, I don't think that's wise for us to do at this point in time. We've got a qualified person that's been recommended by our hiring team. Why are we backpedaling? Because she might be. You know, she has questions that can be addressed by Sherry and Britt. But from our standpoint, we're ready to hire her because we concluded the process that was put in place to have her on board. Get her on board.
I agree with you. I just want her yes or no, and we should have that by the end of the week.
We should what?
We should have a resolution by the end of the week.
How about now?
Well, if I may, so we already have approved the hiring of a planning director. We just have to attach a name to it. So attaching the name to it is based upon whether that person accepted the position. If we adopt a resolution approving that person, that becomes public information. Her name gets out there, and what happens is she says, no, I don't want it, and then all of a sudden, something happens with her other job, but since the purpose and goal and objective is to get her to agree to the position, and then have the resolution ready to hire her by next Tuesday. But I agree, I think we should move forward with the resolution, or move forward, ready to have the resolution ready on Tuesday in the event that this candidate accepts the position and we take action at next Tuesday's council meeting, which we have to do anyway.
Well,
Councilor Freely?
I would make a motion to adopt the resolution to hire a community development planner.
Do we already have one of those in place, Brian?
I believe that we do. If I may, Mayor, maybe,
Please.
maybe the motion may be to move the resolution forward to the regular meeting. And then at that point, assuming that the final questions are resolved, the name could be attached to it and the resolution would be properly before the council at Tuesday's meeting.
So the motion by Councilor Freely to move the resolution forward, a name doesn't have to be attached to it until such time as we determine where that candidate has accepted the position. Is that correct?
Correct. The motion then would just be to direct the city staff to make the final preparations, create the resolution, and have it on the agenda for Tuesday's meeting.
Would that be your motion, Councilor
And it
Freely?
would be because then you're saying that's buying us time to be able to get those questions answered and hopefully it'll move smoothly forward then from that point. Okay, I'm good with that.
Okay, that's Councilor Freely's motion. Is there support for that motion? Is there support for that motion? Support by Councilor Barnzelli supports that motion. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Item number 6 is a request to close the Virginia Public Library on Monday, December 12th, 2022, in order for them to complete moving books and shelving. And we do have our library director, Jody Grabanowski, here.
Okay, thank you.
I will move the request forward.
Councilor Johnson moves to approve the request by the library to close on December 12th to complete moving books and shelving. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Councilor Beyondich. Further discussion? Our library director, Jody Grabanowski. Jody?
Thank you. Yeah, we are in the process of finishing the children's room, and we need to basically blow everything up to put it back together. So we'd like a day to do that. So,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
So it has been moved and supported to do that. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jody.
Item number 7 is to schedule a working session in December to discuss the year's meeting structure.
Okay. I think Councilor Johnson put this on the agenda. Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, every year we get to the first meeting, or every 2 years, and it's kind of rushed, and I think it'd be nice to have some discussions. We've asked questions about the committee structure. We've asked, there's going to be some different, with Councilor Baraboo being gone, there's going to be some big holes that we need to fill, and I think it would be advantageous for us to invite Ms. Motley as a new counselor coming in and just sit and have just a discussion about what our meetings look like, what it looks like moving forward. So I will make a motion to direct city staff to schedule a meeting towards the end of December to discuss what our structure is next year.
Okay. Moved by Councilor Johnson. Is there support? Support by Councilor Freely. Further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Item on the agenda is item number 8, schedule an insurance committee meeting.
Chair, I think you've already scheduled that, is that correct? Insurance committee
I
meeting?
did not put this on the agenda, so is this something?
Counselor Johnson put it on the agenda. Counselor Johnson.
I put it as the chair just to get an update formally with what's going on with WEX, and just to know that we are still happy with PEEP, and just to review, get ahead of it as a small committee so that we can bring it back to the council and say everything's in the right direction. So I will move to put, direct staff to schedule a committee meeting for the insurance committee.
So this is just the insurance committee or the committee of the whole?
Just the insurance committee, and then we can bring back a report to the council as committee of the whole.
That's moved by Counselor Johnson. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Counselor Paulson. Further discussion?
A quick question.
Yes.
So WEX now is currently the new administration of our PEEP program,
Further.
For VIBA.
Eba.
or VIBA. But everything is the same within PEEP or whatever.
Correct.
Okay. So WEX just took over from Further.
Yeah, further it got out of the business.
Okay, thank you.
But it does tie into the insurance because the experience I've had with WEX hasn't been very good, so just at least during the transition period. So it has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carries.
Next item is discuss council coffee dates and meeting places moving forward.
Counselor Johnson, put that on the agenda, or did you put on the agenda, Counselor?
I
Biondi?
didn't, but I was
Counselor
happy
Biondi.
I was happy to see this.
Yeah.
When I was newly elected for my last term, I thought it was important that the general public has a chance to meet the council. This is not something that I feel is requested of anybody to attend, but it was something that I felt as a new council member, it was important for people to get to know me. But I think it's a great idea that we could set up times, not in City Hall, where after working hours, where the general public, if they wanted to come and talk, could come and speak to us without coming to a meeting and standing at the podium. So I am happy to see that it's on here, and I'm not sure how we set up dates or times or places, but it's something I would like to see come back. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we can periodically, set a date each time and so see what the council, what their schedules is moving forward. So, Counselor Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. When we were doing it right before the pandemic, it was every other month, and then we had moved around. We were at Midway Park one time and the senior center, and what I'd like to see is us set those dates for the year ahead of time, because then for me, I can plan accordingly. My concern is that if we don't set it and make it a part of our routine, especially for those of us that are working, it'll get lost and it'll get dropped as it did after the pandemic. So I will, Britt, do you need a formal motion to organize and set those dates for the council, or what's the best way to do that?
It's not necessary, but we could certainly do that. That would be.
Maybe that's something we can talk about at the meeting in December, council? Lots of nods. Okay, let's make sure that's on that agenda then, please. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm supportive of discussing it, but setting specific dates and times, some people can schedule those dates and times, some people can't. Some things come up where you don't have a regularly scheduled, so if the meeting is scheduled for a city council and coffee and that person is working, and when one, it appeases one councilor's schedule but not the other, that doesn't make any sense to me. So by setting a date, occasionally, so we can all figure out what date that would be, and let the public know way ahead of time, I think that'd be more appropriate. But I'm amenable to discussing this move further at this next meeting, so thank you. No motion, so we'll add that to the agenda for the, under section 7. Britt?
The next item on the agenda is approve the resolution to allow for the 11th annual stuffed ambulance to be held on November 25th to the 26th, from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. at the McDonald's parking lot in Virginia.
Move to approve.
Moved to approve by Counselor Paulson and supported by Counselor Beyondich. Any further discussion? I think they're going to need more than one ambulance this year, so it was pretty booked up last year. So any further discussion? Hearing, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carries, thank you. Okay, does anybody have any other item of concern that they'd like to bring up before we adjourn? Pam?
Yes, I did hand out a professional services agreement with SEH. And I did email it on Monday, I believe. So if we wanted to make a motion for that, we can officially adopt it with a resolution at the council meeting.
Basic services agreement is, I don't know, has it changed at all, Britt? You're aware? It has not? Okay, so, all right, thank you. Counselor Johnson?
I'm just curious, that we've had a lot of changes over the last year in Public Works. Is there at any point any of this stuff that can be done internally or pieces that can be taken out that will be less extra cost to us, to SCH, as opposed to it being internally and being submitted in?
No. This is for plan preparation and specifications. We don't have staff that have the ability to prepare plans for construction.
Okay. All right.
Great
thank-
question, but
Thank you.
Counselor Paulson?
Thank you, Mayor. So when I was reviewing this, everything looked fine. It's just a continuance going forward, on the street now, or the street project here. I just have a question with budgetary. This amount, is this something that we have budgeted? And I know, Steve, you're here from Street and Alley, Charlie's not, but is this something that we do have allocated in the budget for this planning from SEH?
Sherry, is this something we budget every year?
Yeah, this is for the street project.
This is a street project one, that's not for the budget, but is there money in the budget for that?
correct.
That's
part of the
why I'm
project
going
budget. Yeah.
for the actual project budget.
It's part of
That's
the
why I
actual
was going
project
to
budget.
Street and Alley or whomever would know that. And how much maybe we set aside for engineering dollar amounts, I don't know. I'm just wanting to make sure we're within our parameter.
Absolutely. For most of the budgets we'd prepare for grants and such, we usually do a 20% engineering architect fee is what and this is actually 15. We're planning the project to be $3 million and it's
Okay.
It's
so
a
I
very
think
small amount, yeah.
That's something that I'd like to have included too when we get SEH coming forward with some of these items. If we could have that in there, just so I understand where the allocation's coming from.
I will put it in the packet for Tuesday.
Thank you.
A copy of the budget.
Mayor?
Sherry?
Yes, I believe with our meeting with George Eilertson and the Street and Alley, that's all going to be in there, Matt.
Oh, perfect.
So-
Okay, so we'll get that information disseminated then. And then just to kind of piggyback on Counselor Johnson's last thought, are there any ways in which we can save some dollars having our Public Works Department do some of this? I know not on this specific type of project, but do we look at that, like what we can separate out for our staff that can actually do that work rather than paying the engineering firm? Have we done that in the past?
We used to oftentimes, like RFPs is something we don't necessarily need Matt to prepare. We do them ourselves. So we do try to find ways that we can do our own work, basically.
Okay,
It's not often, like with this plan, this one's a little different because this is design
sure,
and
it's a
plans
total
and-
project,
It's
I
a total
get it.
project.
Right.
Yeah.
But in the future, I think that would be something, I don't know if Jim, you'd be open to doing that or to giving us some updates or thoughts as, as we move forward with planning different things in the city, that if we could save some money on that, that'd be great. Yeah, wanna come up?
Jim Rosvit, our Public Works Director. Welcome, Jim.
Morning. I was just going to say, I don't know if I brought you up to speed on our GIS program. Have we talked about that in the council at all?
No, it hasn't gone to the council yet.
And that's something we're working on. And what that is it's a program that's put on either a tablet or laptop, and it gives us all of our infrastructure. It'll give us our plow routes, our garbage routes, our locations of all our utilities underground, our Y ties, our sewers, our depths. It's all put into a program, and we are working with the SEH to put this in. So they have 10 years of documentation. And that's the way all the municipalities and government entities are going now. They're going to this GIS program. We haven't stepped up to that level yet, but it is something that we're working on obtaining. Once it is put into perspective, we can add in-house and go out and add all that into layers. So it's going to save the city a lot of money, even coming when it's time to bid that work or to get that information to determine, have documentation of what's new when it was done. I mean, you can put videos in there, you can put notes in there, and it's all at your fingertips. So that is a part that we're working on. We're working a lot on technology things too. We're trying to update, get into a program of maintenance and routines and set budgets to work with, so. All right.
Thank you, Jim. Councilor Johnson?
One last question, and I don't remember if I've asked this before, but when we're doing street and alley projects, does the utilities pay a portion of the engineering fees and all that as well? Like all that planning stuff, is that all part of what they contribute, or are they just paying for their stuff?
Now, let me look back. I do believe they pay for just their stuff because it's our project, and we usually get IRRB funds to help pay for engineering. So it's usually, we take all the grant money, and
Because I guess
they
that
do
would
have
be,
the GIS system at the utilities. So they have all their stuff digitally, so they don't have to have everything televised like we do. They don't have to do as much work like we do, because they're already ahead of the game on that.
and so would that be something that we should have, like we should share systems?
You're going to, and that's we have a proposal we're going to bring forward to the council. We just haven't figured out how we're going to pay for it yet.
Okay.
It's very large. But that's the intent, is to get the same program the utility has so that we both can share. They can have ours, we can have theirs, and we can all talk the same language and see the same
Excellent.
stuff.
All right, thank you very much, Britt. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jim. And then under this contract, which we don't have a motion yet, on the professional service agreement for SCH, does say on page 2 in the last where it says the City of Virginia and/or the VPU will provide record drawings, property and right-of-way information, standard streetlight specification, and any necessary permit application fees. And beyond that, their GIS system is in place now. We're working on ours, as Jim had indicated, and try to collaborate on the two, so they're all working together as one. So to answer your question, I think that's part of the process moving forward. So we're looking for information or action by the council regarding the agreement for professional services for SCH.
I'll move this to the council meeting for approval.
Councilor Johnson moves the agreement for professional services with SCH to the next council meeting for approval. Is there support? Support by Councilor Freelieb. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. I have one addition, if I may go back to item number 7, which is scheduled working session in December to discuss this year's meeting structure. Seeing as all cards are going to be on the table for this moving forward, I'd like Pam to please provide blank forms of all the committees that we have, so that we can talk about, what counselor can sit on what committee, what's available. We have to, and I know the mayor approves those, but let's talk about and see what we can do and make sure everybody is on the same page and is comfortable in the committee structure that they're in, or if they want to move somewhere else. So if you could provide those as well. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, anything else to come before the committee of the whole meeting before we adjourn?
Mayor?
First, Councilor Beyondich, and then Councilor Paulson. Councilor Beyondich.
I was just wondering if we would be addressing the correspondence that we received.
You mean the email from the WASCI?
Correct.
Okay, we can talk about that. We just received that. We can make, take some action about doing some research or finding out the information or providing some clarification for the WASCI group with respect to their request. Go ahead, Counselor Beyondich, and then over to Counselor Johnson.
I just wanted to open up the conversation, so Counselor Johnson can go ahead.
Okay, Counselor Johnson.
Oh, yeah, I know last year there was a struggle with the people sponsoring the private event. Is that an issue again this year with the WASCI sponsoring Festival of Trees because it's being advertised? That's what I got out of the letter. I'm just concerned because she's got some very valid concerns, and one of them being as a community member sponsoring an athletic team, and her understanding was that that team couldn't wear her logo in the building. And if that's true, I'm concerned, and if it's not true, I want to dispel that right now, because the whole idea of this building was a community-based center where everybody could participate and everybody could do, and I am kind of disappointed that what I thought was a great community partnership agreement moving forward has become a serious point of contention, and it bothers me that we have community businesses that are not being good community partners. And I don't know if that's something that can be addressed or how that's addressed or where we address it, but it needs to come out, and we need to figure that out. And I don't know what direction that looks like. I don't know if it now becomes a legal issue, and I guess I have rambled on many questions. The question I would like answered specifically is, can WASCI sponsor jerseys that play in that building?
I did have a brief conversation with our city attorney prior to the meeting and looking for some clarity and some advice, or not, well, some direction moving forward as we discuss this. I concur that this is too restrictive and we need some clarity. Brian?
Thank you, Mayor. And I can speak to the specific issue about the jerseys. I don't see any violation of the contract if a team has a jersey. If a team is sponsored by any local business and comes into the arena, it's not the city renting space or providing a venue for competitors of Iron Trail Motors to advertise. It's simply a sports team playing a sporting event in a building, and whatever patches or sponsors they may have on their jersey are irrelevant to the agreements between the city and Iron Trail Motors. And so to speak to the specific item about jerseys or sponsoring a team, there should be no hesitation about sponsoring a team, that team wouldn't be able to play at the city's arena.
Does that answer part of your question, Councilor Johnson?
It does. However, Ryan, with all due respect, that's your interpretation of our agreement. And as we've been learning, their interpretation is different. Is there the need to create an addendum that specifically says something that clears all this up, so both teams are both partners in the naming rights agreement have the same understanding?
Brian?
Thank you, Mayor. That certainly isn't a bad idea. I can make contact with Mr. Burns, who represents Iron Trail Motors, and start that conversation to try and get some formal agreement in place to dispel some of these questions.
Okay, I would imagine we need that in the form of a motion to direct our staff and our attorney to do that very thing.
Before we do that, can I?
Yeah, Councilor Paulson.
I'm just reading the contract, and I don't know, Pam has sent it a couple times, but I'm just reading, and it doesn't sound very good to me. Under signage and sponsorship exclusivity, item number 2, the city agrees that with respect to all events that are scheduled or hosted at the new facilities, unless approved in writing by Iron Trail, No company competing with Iron Trail should be allowed to be a sponsor of any kind for such event. If you read the whole section C, it's, I mean, I know we've entered into the agreement. Unfortunately, I'm in the position, I feel that our original agreement was very restrictive, as this building is a community-based building, and it's very restrictive against anyone else coming in that has a potential, I would quote-unquote, competing business. And I think we even went to the point where we were asking, is it car parts and tires? And I remember we had that kind of an in-depth conversation. I don't know, Brian, if it's possible to reopen up this contract, and that would be, if we did, it would mean a lower dollar amount, I'm sure, coming from Iron Trail. But I think it's only fair that we be realistic, that there have been community partners, businesses, whomever, that have sponsored community events for decades in the city of Virginia, and they're being almost prohibited, well, they are being prohibited, if not, I don't want to use the word ostracized. We signed the contract. The language is pretty clear in the contract. Is there wiggle room with jerseys? Potentially. But I'm going to say something that maybe I shouldn't say, mainly because, I mean, I know the Festival of Trees moves around, but the potential that the Festival of Trees did not, are not hosting any events at the Iron Trail Motors Event Center, with Washke's being one of their main sponsors. I do not know if that was a conversation that the foundation had, but, and maybe they've agreed to have it at different locations, the actual Festival of Trees activities. But I do recall last year, I think the majority of the activities were at the Iron Trail Motors Event Center. So what is the city losing in terms of events not being able to happen at the Iron Trail Motors Event Center because of the prohibitive sponsorship or advertising language that is now within our contract, that has been in this contract? And I'm sorry to rip the Band-Aid off. I feel like this contract is not quite as, it's not amicable to the city, as amicable as it could have been. And that's just, I guess, you know, when we're flushing out events happening over the course of this last year and seeing some of the conflicts with, I don't know if it was, Brian, if there was, it was a bantam, some hockey tournament, and they were on a, it was on a banner. They had some, I think Washke's had their name on it, and I know there was some pushback on that. So I just feel like I don't know if there's a potential to open up this contract and have a realistic discussion about community partners and usage of a community building. I know it also states in the contract that if there is a breach, that the city or whomever is in breach is given a specified time frame. I don't know if it's 30 days or 60 days, Brian, Lindsay, to cure it, and the curing would be whatever it states in the contract. You have, I don't know if it's 30 days or 60 days to cure it. I could scroll down and look. But I guess realistically, this contract is starting to not make any sense, and I don't know what we can do about it. And I'm just concerned after receiving this email from a very long time, very amazing community partner who has donated many, many thousands of dollars to our community in many respects over the course of decades, to be prohibited. That's just concerning to me, and it doesn't seem like the overall gist of why that building was built and why we wanted to do naming rights in the first place. It just seems very prohibitive and exclusive. And I think that's, I'm just being very honest and speaking what from my heart. It's hard to have this conversation, but that's what I feel from my heart. And I've heard it from a lot of people that it's kind of a sad situation, and I don't know if the city has any ability to open this contract up, even if it's for less, which would be less amount of money, I know, But at what point is the equilibrium from the events that we could possibly lose, or the sponsorship dollars that could be lost with competing entities, whether it be a Lundgren or a Washkes, what is the loss in those potential dollars? So I'd like to have that discussion. It's a hard discussion to have, but I think it's important. And I don't know, Brian, if we have anywhere to go with that, but just what I'd like to just share today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Paulson. Councilor Freely? And then we'll go to Councilor Beyondich. Councilor Freely?
I agree that that contract has become exceedingly stifling to the city with regard to allowing people to sponsor jerseys, to having posters, and so on and so forth. But it does state in that contract that Iron Trail Motors can provide exemptions in writing. I suggest that the city write to Iron Trail Motors seeking a blanket exemption on behalf of the city to be able to allow whatever is necessary at our discretion to provide those opportunities to other entities in town to sponsor accordingly. That would be the quickest, easiest thing to do, is approach Iron Trail and say, hey, this contract clause has become too stifling to us, and we would seek a blanket exemption in writing from you for our discretion to allow whatever is necessary to maximize our revenue, which would not necessarily in any way deter them from having revenue from their advertising. Because the reality is, the naming rights essentially was an advertising contract in a sense. And they've got, I could see, certainly they're going to be opposed to having Washke have this center ice in the Toyota Arena. Of course, that's not going to be allowed. But kids being sponsored with jersey patches and or posters for events that are being held in down, for us to even have to concern ourselves with that seems ludicrous. So I think we need to address that clause where they can provide us written permission to do so, and we want a written permit to be able to, at our discretion, determine what's appropriate for allowance in our community building. Seems the simplest way. Then you don't even have to open up and renegotiate. There's always a clause that we can address in there. You can provide that to us in writing. We would like that in a blanket sense. And I don't know that they.
And I think that's the direction we're going with. Hopefully, we haven't taken any action, but putting our city attorney in touch with their attorney to address that very issue and how that's structured, where we have a little more latitude moving forward. So I agree, it's way too restrictive. We made that decision, unfortunately, in my opinion, those parts of the clause of the contracts. Councilor Beyondich.
And I will tack on to exactly what you're saying. I think it is very restrictive to our other businesses. I'm curious and fearful to see how the Homeboat and Travel Show plays out, because that was another big event that's been held in this city for years. But I know there was some pushback also at that event. So I would be very happy to have the city take some part of control back, that our community members in our neighboring communities feel welcome to use that building without having pushback. And I think as the city, we signed that agreement. I don't think individuals or the businesses should have to go and ask that permission. I think as a city, it's our responsibility to reach out and do that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So, Councilor Johnson.
Thank you. And to add on to what you were saying, Councilor Paulson, what revenue are our nonprofits missing out on because they can't get those sponsorships or are afraid to ask for those sponsorships because of this? And I think, as I've read this email 3 times sitting here, and at the end it talks about the all-night grad party, and we're putting some undue stress on our staff as well with this. You know, that one person has to ask another business for permission that maybe they'll give us a free night. that's not fair to our staff. I see Brian shaking his head. I'm just reading what it's got in here, so if there's some clarification, I'd appreciate that.
Please let me clarify that. The all-night grad party was coming asking if the city would waive the fees to use the event center for the night. I don't have the authority to waive the fees. I had given them the option that they could write a letter to get on the Park and Rec agenda, to have the Park and Rec Commission to consider waiving their fees, which then could come to the city council. Or I recommended that this year's parents do what last year's senior parents did, which was go sit down and talk with Brian Schatt at Iron Trail Motors and say, would you be a sponsor of the all-night grad party? Part of your agreement with the facility is you get so many room rentals per year. Would you, as your sponsorship, give us one of those room rentals? He was more than gracious enough to do that last year and was a sponsor of the all-night grad party. I was suggesting to them that they do the exact same thing, because if history plays out, he'll probably do the exact same thing, and then they don't need a discounted rate. They get a community partner involved in that. Now, we have another person who is is involved with the all-night grad party that has a competing business, and so that's where that is coming from. Also wanted to bring up that a competing business is a sponsor of youth hockey tournaments this year. So they are still engaged in the community. We don't have any of the youth hockey sponsors permanently displayed in the building. Over the weekend, the highest tier of youth hockey tournament sponsors, we did do a little scrolling thing on the center hung scoreboard for those people as a partnership that we have with youth hockey. It just so happens that the competing business was not one of those, so it was a non-issue. But our competing businesses to Iron Trail Motors still can support youth sports. There's nothing saying that they can't. We just do not permanently affix any competing businesses' logos in our building anywhere or display them.
And I appreciate that, Brian. I appreciate that clarification, because that's the kind of stuff that stirs people up, is when someone has some information. And I think that's what my point is that so far it's not been an issue, but it could be. If somebody goes to the meeting or goes to and they see a car up there and then they don't like that, they're going to come find you as it's playing and say, take it down. Or that's what has happened in the past. And I think we really need to be clear on what that means and what we're doing. Because my understanding was that anybody who rents the space can do what they want in it because they've rented the space from the city. And that's not been the last year's history. So with that being said, I would move to direct staff to bring some solutions forward to allow community sponsorships by private business and nonprofits back to the council, and we can have a discussion about that contract and what we're going to do moving forward.
Did you get that motion, Pam?
That one more time, Councilor Johnson.
City staff to bring forward solutions for allowing sponsorships by private businesses and nonprofits in the building and bring it back to the council for discussions about our contract and how we move forward. Thank you.
Okay, that's the motion. Is there support for that motion? Is there support for that motion? Support by Councilor Barnzelli. Any further discussion? Councilor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. So in part of that email that we received was the question of also rocker boards, is that not correct? And at this time, within this contract, that is not a provision that can be accommodated, is that correct?
Brian, I believe so. That is correct.
That is correct.
And I feel that this is where I'm going. I appreciate the motion that you made. I'm under the opinion that this is just way too restrictive, period. And that's my opinion. It's not only nonprofits, but it's the whole blanket of the contract. And it's so exclusive that it doesn't include the rest of our community partners who have been included for decades. And I don't know if that looks like an addendum. I think that's a really good idea. But I feel like this truly needs to be addressed, and nothing against Iron Trail Motors. It's just, look at the problems that it's causing. It's a ripple effect. Do we have permission to do this? Can we do this? Well, I got to check with this. Are we renting this? To me, it's just so restrictive. And it does cause angst, and it does cause, like I said, I don't know what the foundation decided this year or how that was decided. But if one or two of the main sponsors can't be sponsoring because of the restrictive issue with having the event at the Iron Trail Motors Event Center, and now it's at the Elks, that's concerning to me. Because that's why we built the facility, so that our whole community could use the facility. So, and I'm not saying that that's the reason. I don't know the reason. I haven't asked anybody. But I feel like it's not only the advertising portion of it, but it's also the requirement of 100% of high school hockey being played in, let's address the contract for what it is. There's a lot of issues now going forward, as we've discussed high school usage of the facility, what the expectations are in the contract, or is 100%. I don't know whether the right thing to do would be to offer an addendum or to actually just discuss opening up the contract and renegotiating. I'm open to both, but I feel like there's just so much restrictiveness in this contract. Not only that, but we agreed to something, the city council agreed to this contract with Iron Trail without having a contract in place already with Rock Ridge ISD 2909. And to me, that's a null and void portion because we didn't have that original commitment from the school district. So there's just a lot of parts of this contract that aren't, to me, they're valid only because we've entered into the agreement, but they're not really valid because it's causing so much problems. So I don't know, do we revisit the whole thing or do we do an addendum? I don't know. I'd really like some guidance on that, and maybe that's what your motion is, that we get some, solutions brought forward to us so we can take a look at what, maybe that entails. But just overall, it just feels like it hasn't been a real good fit. Thank you.
I'd like to weigh in before we go. We voted for this. Everybody in this council voted for this contract. We knew what was in the contract, we read what was in the contract, and we voted for this contract. Now we regret it. I know I regret it, and I think something has to be done, right? Part of the motion is to start that process. We need to seek adjustments and accommodations for the Iron Trail Motors Event Center to allow some latitude for us to be all-inclusive. Now, some of the reasons for some of these events not coming aren't primarily for advertising. That might be one part of it. The other part is the cost associated. There's a lot of other things that are involved in this regard. I think part of the motion is to start this discussion, to have our city staff and our city attorney approach Iron Trail Motors, find a way to have some reasonable accommodations and adjustments to the contract, some clarity to give us some latitude moving forward. That's the best sense to do it. We have to get permission from them to do it, or we have to at least negotiate that. And I think if I'm speaking out of place, please let me know, Brian, in whatever way that's the quickest. if this isn't working out for us, if it's creating a problem for us, if this is something that is adversely affecting the way we operate the Iron Tri Motors Event Center, there's another option, and that is severing the contract altogether. And then making the adjustments moving forward in that regard. That's an option we have, because if we violate the contract, we can't get reasonable accommodations for that, we decide to go another direction, that's the next step. Is that kind of an option moving forward, like a, what do you call a nuclear option?
We call it anticipatory breach.
Okay, anticipatory breach.
But it isn't, it's an option.
Okay, thank you very much. Counselor Beyondich, and then over to Counselor Johnson.
Thank you. And if I recall, the hockey, the games being played at the center, we were told was secured. That was a verbal, nothing was on paper. So we voted on something that we did not have all the information on. And it appears that they won't all be played here ever. So that bothered me, that and I'll take full responsibility. I voted on what I was told. And there are 4 entities involved in the Festival of Trees. So those 4 groups came together and made that decision, not just the foundation. So there are numerous things in this that I think we as a council need to look at this contract with the attorney to see what is not working, what is working, and work from there before we take one section. We need to look at the whole thing, revisit it, and see what we can do from there. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to direct staff. Would you read the motion back, and then there's some more further discussion from Counselor Johnson.
Need a little more verbiage in there. Moved by Counselor Johnson, supported by Counselor Baranzelli, to direct staff to bring forward solutions for sponsorships by private businesses and to move forward with the potential contract discussions.
That is correct.
That is correct for my motion.
Okay, moved and supported. Further discussion, Counselor Johnson.
I would amend it to, with the part about the contract, and revisit the contract as a whole, so that it's very specific.
Okay.
I amended
So
my
the
motion.
amendment, there's an amendment, Counselor Baranzelli, to the motion to include discussion of the entire contract as a whole. In conjunction with that, would you also amend your second? Amended by Counselor Baranzelli. Okay, thank you. Counselor Johnson?
Thank you. And part of my motion is not to approach Iron Trail at all at this point. These are internal discussions that I would like to be brought back to us and have a discussion as a council, how we're going to move forward as a council, what our game plan is, excluding the other person. That's their problem. That's their world. Let's figure out what our plan is moving forward. And then at that time, we can authorize staff to present what we feel is the best way forward.
Yeah, I think that's the intent for us to do so. So it has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Here, Counselor Freely.
So it's essentially a review of the contract and determining where it's stifling us and how we can address that with Iron Trail.
Move forward.
May in fact even be a whole new contract. I'm fine with that. I think we could keep it simpler, but there's more than just one issue. That's the truth. So maybe we need to look at it more holistically. So yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay. Any other items to come before the council today on others concern? Okay, seeing and hearing none, we will stand adjourned at our committee whole meeting. The time is 10:31 a.m. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day. We stand adjourned.